All right, here we are. Let's date it. It's 2012. And this is a current group of, say, the earliest generation available.
Still breathing.
You're no longer calling this a seniors interview tape. These are now family interview tapes.
Seniors is all right.
Okay.
Elderly is not.
No, that's won't be used. All right, so once again, I was asking about impressions of the memorial service yesterday and all the memories and the strong feelings that everybody brought to the ceremonies. Or you can just jump in and just start talking. I don't care.
It was really a wonderful history of the lake and the part that people played in it that I don't think anybody really realizes how important each person was. And
So were there any stories you heard yesterday you hadn't heard in a long time? That hadn't been told? You tell the camera?
but not all together.
No.
I mean, it was sort of a combination of so many things and so many thoughts and what so many people added to this place, and I think it was a memorial, but it was also a history.
I learned something yesterday when Sally told us that Will Simon had sent her father to college, and otherwise he would not have been able to go. So I thought that was really very special.
You have any memories of that time, Joanne?
Well, not a Jim going to college.
No, but I mean,
Oh, Will
Bill
was the
making-
most generous man on earth. I mean, there were no secrets about it. That when Eleanor and Jack wanted to buy the house from Aunt Teeny, that he loaned them the money to buy the house. In fact, I don't remember when it was, but I was here when the four of them, the Simons and Eleanor and Jack sat down and celebrated the tearing up of the mortgage or the end of the whatever. And I don't know, with fewer people there was a certain closeness that everybody was in on. There were people teaching people things. Steve took out the little Squire one day.
could you speak up just a little?
He took out the little Squire, and he came back because the propeller wasn't working right. And I was sitting down there with Jim and the cotter key, and something was wrong. So Steve goes into the boathouse, and he comes out, and he's got a hammer, and he's going to put this thing in place. And at that point, after watching this whole performance, Jim Man stands up and says, "Steve, just a minute." And then he learned how you had to have either a rubber hammer or put a block behind it, and that you didn't just put bang metal on metal. And this is the way everything went here. Somebody was always teaching somebody about how the boats worked, or how help me fix the pier. And people said that John Mann was quiet. John Mann was quiet, but you better listen, because what came out was so funny, and if you weren't listening, you missed it. And whenever John and Joe would fight, herself would come in and calm them down. And then probably
meant John and Jim.
I meant John and Jim.
John and Jim, what did I say?
You said John and Joe.
Oh, no, John
And I realized
Jim.
any fighting they did was probably in Casablanca.
Yeah, and then Joe would settle it, and then tell Jimmy was wrong.
You know, there's one thing I remember about Will so well. Jimmy and Buddy were playing something in here, some card game, and they were keeping score. And Will looked at the score tab tab, and it was the stationery from, what did you used to call the
Knotty
place?
Pines.
Knotty Pines. And Bill got, Big Bill, got so furious. He said, "You people don't know how to save your money." And it was a big lesson, and I can hear it all right now, and I can see it, and I can see the faces of the boys. You know, they were older boys, and they were really shocked at what Will had to say, and it was well said.
The stationery was an investment back then. It was a part of the
Right.
pride of the house to
And
be
you're
able
supposed
to.
to keep scoring something else.
That's right.
Oh, boy.
I once asked Will Simon, I said, you know, someday I'd like to build my own house up here. He said, honey, you'll never have a house up here because the wheels have all the charm, but they don't know how to make a nickel.
You know, honey, we do share thoughts, don't we?
You
Absolutely was thinking the same thing.
Don't worry, honey, you're not going to have a house.
I remember so clearly, you know, Peg and Celeste sat side by side on this porch day after day after day. Two sisters, so much alike and so different. But Nan and I came up because it was time to tell people that Jean was going to be a bar mitzvah. And the two sisters looked at each other and they said, you know, we've never had a bar mitzvah in the family before. It was quite a shock. The two of them were such a pair. Such an amazing, amazing pair. And they were so generous to each other and would fight over a nickel.
You know, that brings up an interesting point, because what is the history of Judaism at the lake? You know, and
History of what?
No, the comment that one made to the other was, we've never had anything like this happen at Cedar Lake before. We had divorces, we had drunks, we had affairs, but we never had a bar mitzvah. And many people, Steve came to Jean's bar mitzvah, as did Sally, Salzer, and who else? There were three of you.
I came to Teddy's, not Jean's.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I didn't know what a bar mitzvah was when Jean was bar mitzvah. I'd never heard of one.
You never heard of it. Well,
Barry, may I ask a question?
in fact, Steve, you are the one person who's actually taking advantage of this opportunity. I was hoping to get people more of your generation to be here to do just that.
Well, I just, to stay on topic, I just wondered, my mom is sitting in Will Simon's chair. Does anybody remember anything about when he got that chair, or?
Oh, he saw it in Palm Springs and thought it was the most comfortable thing ever. And bought one and had it shipped here, and it was his chair.
I just wanted to.
yeah, that's fine.
Now, if your camera is focused on the chair, I could hint to your generation. I have redone this once.
I remember that. That
And
was.
some idiot in our family said, oh, the chair's falling apart, we should throw it because of this. We should throw it out over my dead body.
Is this really the original chair?
Yes.
It's not the original cushions, we keep having those redone.
Yeah.
But I spent
Because I
a whole
remember
week
a
out in
different
front
chair.
here with Joe saying, you've got to sand it down some more.
The original chair was the original built-in ashtray.
Oh,
Yes.
and then.
Right.
what
Which I had
did
to
was-
scour to clean that
I
thing.
took the-
After Bowie passed, I went ahead and cleaned it out.
I took the arms off and I went over to Jim Mann and I didn't ask him. I just said, Jim, these are the arms from the chair. Refinish them for me. I probably put a piece in there. So, Maybe we'll be finishing if I ever get this done again.
Very easy.
Wow, there's not a whole lot of original furnishings left at the lake. The 4 doors
Oh, yeah,
was
we have some-
replaced.
We have phenomenal originals, but I want to tell you about the builder of the new house, because he truly has such a sense. By the way, it also happens to be John D. Mann, otherwise known as Chip. But before we tore down the old 4 doors, we took the mantelpiece from the old house, and it is now the mantelpiece of the current house. Great continuity, great way to remember and yet go forward. Of course, now when things go wrong and I go to the builder, he says, the warranty is up. What can you do?
Well, the house is 19 years old.
Yep.
Is that how old I
Was
was?
Ellis 19? Yeah.
You know, this was the first ranch-type house that was built in this part of Wisconsin.
Absolutely. People look at this house and can't believe that it was built in 1939.
Right. What Vernon Esser?
Yeah.
Well, say Vernon Esser, but
Vernon,
but they used to call him Vermin. But if you want to go back a long way, one of the stories I loved the most was the story of Teeny and Horty, who were great friends and sisters and lived in the big house. And they played double solitaire every night. And they each had a bedroom upstairs. And so one of them would get angry at the other, and they'd steam out and say, I'll never talk to you again. And the two of them would steam up the stairs and go in their room, and the next morning, the sun shone.
All right, so
But they
Teeny,
used to get so, the story goes, they used to get so angry at each other that nobody thought they could ever be friends again.
let's identify for posterity. So Teeny was, that's the,
It's Ernestine
Ernestine Stein.
Simon
okay, and Horty,
was Horty.
Hortense?
Lost in antiquity, I think.
Yeah.
Was she ever married, Hortense?
I don't know. I knew, because I was a little girl when I came out here with my parents, because they were friends of the Jack Manns. I had the privilege of knowing that Teeny. But I don't remember Horty at all.
I wonder if she's part of the family that moved to Michigan. A good part of the family did.
I don't know.
And you know, back in those days, people either came to Wisconsin or they came to Michigan. They didn't go back and forth. There were not the kind of roads and transportation there is today. I went one time with Aunt Peg and with Elsa Hayden and with my mother, and we traveled to see family in Michigan. It was really quite an experience. Just traveling with those three was quite an experience. I will tell you that, but they were.
Where in Michigan? The western
Yes.
shore? Yeah.
No, just yes. You may be looking for memories, but some of us have very short ones.
I'm just curious where they would have gone in Michigan. The west, to me, the western
Well, they were
lake shore would
they
be-
were somewhere on the shores of,
Yeah.
of Michigan.
Okay.
I thought you were the driver.
I was the driver.
He was 16.
Right, and at that time, the three of them, we stayed in a hotel one night, and the three of them had to share a room because they would not permit my mother and I to share a room. Absolutely not. It was nutty.
Yeah,
Now these days, they don't care who shares a room with whom.
It is fun to imagine people coming up here by train and being met in Slinger in this old truck that was the cab and bringing everybody out to the lake. I guess it must have been,
It was the zoo line.
yeah, like the zoo ride is right. But, and to hear the stories, I'm just sorry we don't have somebody who really is ancient enough to know the early stories of the White House
Mm-hmm.
and the people who lived there, and the whole story is really quite a tale.
Didn't, what was her first name? Anderson, Eleanor Anderson.
Eleanor Anderson.
When I was first around here as a new
Yeah.
bride, Eleanor Anderson was keeping house next door.
Well, she and her husband, Bob,
Mm-hmm.
came up with them, and Elle was very ill, and they
Well,
sort of
Elle
took
was
over.
gone.
No, Elle was gone by
Gone.
then.
Well, but they also helped before she
Sure.
was gone.
You know,
Yeah.
I was thinking last night when they were talking about Charles Morgenthau and his first arrival at the lake in the cart. We weren't here, but
That's the
David
one
and
thing
I were
wish I'd
in the.
been here for.
Hmm?
That's the one thing of all the stories I've heard, I wish I had been here to see.
Lots of us. David and I were at home playing ball in the driveway, which was a level below the porch. And Mom came out and said to the two of us, if you could be anywhere in the world, where would you like to be? And of course, anywhere in the world always meant here, because this is the heart home for all of us. And we said, Cedar Lake, and she says, good, because, get ready, because we're going, and we literally drove almost all night long to get here. There was no room in the house, so we stayed in the inn, which at the time was next door, long gone. Just so that Mom and Dad could be here to be with Jerry and Charles and with Aunt Peg for their engagement. It was a wonderful experience, and we were, of course, thrilled just to be along for the ride. So
When you say their engagement, you mean a party celebrating their engagement?
that's why they came out here. Charles in his suit and tie and suitcase.
And 2 pairs of socks.
Absolutely, because I don't think anybody had ever seen anyone wearing a coat and tie up here. So,
What did he wear after the paint got all over his clothing?
I suspect he wore them anyway. Right? You know, David and I and Nan were rather young at the time. This was in the mid-40s, I would guess.
The person who was really full of pain
Was Bill.
was Bill. And everybody said, where's Bill? Well, he's back in the woodshed. In the woodshed. He's trying to get the paint off his clothes.
I don't think I ever knew that he did the paint job.
Oh, yeah. Of course, you know, in those days, the paint took 3 or 4 days to dry. It wasn't anything fast drying, and they put it on at the last minute. Oh,
That
was
cart
fun.
was an amazing cart. It was like a square box mounted on 2 large wheels that were maybe about 18 inches, made of metal, and a handle. And that was it. It was primarily used to move things from a car down to the house. So,
There are no pictures of that, are there?
I'm not sure cameras had been invented
Oh.
yet.
I'm sorry.
The box brownie?
Yes, that was it. So.
Everybody who was waiting said, how will we know when you're near here? And somebody else said, you'll hear the noise.
Yes.
This darn trailer made so much noise.
The trailer was back in the woods for years.
Oh, absolutely. It was permitted to rot peacefully.
I remember climbing on it as a child back there, and I know it was that one because there was painted on the side in fading white paint. I think it's a just married, maybe it's a just engaged. Just engaged.
Yeah, because they were married in St. Louis. And at the time, we met Charles's brother Eugene. And you absolutely could not tell the difference between the two of them at that time. We were amazed that there could be two such twins.
Niffin.
Yeah. And of course, the Niffins became then the oldest twins ever in the city of New York.
I still have a tape of them.
On the Phil Donahue show. Right.
The 5 minutes that they were interviewed.
Yeah.
And the only difference is they wore different types of glasses.
Mhm.
They were 90 years old, or however old.
Doesn't sound so old now, does it, Joan?
Not in the least.
Trust me that the only...
Easy for me to
right.
say, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust me, the only non-differences between the two were facial. In terms of personality, massive differences between
Oh, my
the
goodness.
That came across just in those few minutes on the Donahue show. Eugene, right, spoke up quite a bit. He would cut off Charlie. You know, it was almost like, I don't know, I got the impression that he was a stronger kind of...
It's the older brother.
The older brother, yeah, that's the 1 minute older.
But, when you think of Jane and Charles' ability to survive the loss of an only child, and to go on and be the people they were, truly amazing.
Well, they loved people, and people loved them.
Don, what was your first memory of being at the lake?
Well, I think I came up probably it was 1949 or 1950, and it was quite an experience, to say the least. To have one strange kid wander in among this very, very closely knit group. But it was, you notice I came back.
Didn't scare
and I love it. I love it up here, and I love the family.
You want to know why he came back? Because fortunately, my mother, who was never a very big drinker,
Well,
had enough to drink one night to finally confront him and say, "When the hell are you going to marry my daughter?"
and it wasn't long after that.
No, I remember distinctly my father going up to the Glazer drugstore, and of course in Missouri at that time on a Sunday, no liquor could be sold, and he needed some champagne, and he knew the head of the drugstore there, and he said, Gene, he says, we can't sell liquor on Sunday. He said, fine. He says, you can call it Saturday or Monday. I don't care which, but I need it today. So, Dad was such a quiet person, except here. The stories told of a man dancing, waltzing up the lawn with his old checkered robe flying in the wind and nothing else under the robe was not the father I knew, but was certainly the father I heard of. He must have been quite a young man, and
He was another gentleman.
he
Was a
was
gentleman.
most certainly a gentleman,
Yeah.
unless you crossed him. And then he was still gentle. But underneath that gentleness was an awful lot of steel. Or iron, if you prefer.
I mean, yeah.
I was going to say, maybe we'll call it.
Well, that would be a compliment, though, if you compare refatably with your father.
I would say steel fits right in there.
Steel fits right in. I used to go fishing in the morning when we first got married, and there were a lot of hello guys.
Come on through.
There were a lot of bass that swam underneath the Simon boat, and I used to catch a bass every morning, and that was Will Simon's favorite
Breakfast?
breakfast was to have fresh bass, and I would bring him a freshly caught bass, and then around 11 o'clock I would come up and talk to him, and it was 12 o'clock Sunday, which meant that he could have a drink. And the only thing I didn't enjoy with it was when he got his cigar out and began to smoke the cigar, and always wanted me to join him to have a cigar, and I hated him.
Did he make bacon all the way back then too, first thing in the morning?
No, this
No,
was
that
Will
was
Simon, not
Will.
Bill.
No,
Oh.
no, this wasn't Bill.
Bill.
Bill made
Will.
the bacon.
I'm
This
sorry.
was-
So
Your
Will
generation.
Simon is
Bill's father.
Bill's father. Will,
Yes.
Bill. Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would have caught a fish for Willie if he had wanted him.
So Gramps is who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Gigi and Gramps.
Right.
Gigi and Grant.
To some people.
To some people, yeah.
Gigi
In this
and Pop-
family,
It
yeah.
was Gigi and Pop to the majority of his grandchildren.
Gigi and Pop.
Yeah, it was just a couple of people lived in like a weird place like Cincinnati. He was grand.
They had names like Bowie for people.
Well, they actually lived.
I actually
in-
understand that's where she is, out at buoy number 2.
John?
Well, they actually lived
You
with
know,
Celeste
you
and Will
say
during
that.
World War
Wait.
II for a while. I believe.
Who did?
I believe Libby came up after Bob went in the service. Libby came up with her kids to Glencoe and lived with them for, I don't know, weeks, months, for a period of time. I mean, that's really when I think Nan and Susan really got to know their grandparents. But you'd have to ask them.
Night.
There was this wonderful couple that used to come up with Will and Celeste and take care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth and Lewis.
Huh?
Ruth and Lewis?
Ruth and Lewis, yeah.
Well, he liked to party with us. He was a party boy.
Oh, was he ever?
Yeah.
And when he'd go into Slinger, the only black man anybody there had ever seen. He might as well have come from Mars.
So they were like the live-in help, is that what you're saying?
They were.
If
And
you
they-
want to look back there, that's where they lived.
Yeah.
In the annex.
In the annex.
Oh, yeah.
The annex was built, what, 5 years after the house or something like that, wasn't it?
Oh,
Mid-50s.
Oh,
Much-
mid-50s, oh, much later.
Much
Okay.
later.
Okay. I remember it cost 2/3 of the cost of the big house.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Something, or the same price or
Or,
something.
yeah.
For inflation. One thing I got to tell you about Bill Simon. Celeste had a beautiful gray Cadillac. It had a few dents and scratches in it, but Bill only had the side that Celeste rode on painted because he said she'd never see the other side. He's a very practical man. So,
Remember his Model A?
yes, I do. He loved it.
He loved old cars.
Right. So,
He loved cars.
mhm. I tell him about you and Bill following his death.
Well, Mike asked me to pick up Bill at the funeral home, and Mike had to work or something, so I went to the funeral home, and they said to me, "Would you like me to put Mr. Simon in the car?" I said, "I would greatly appreciate that." So he put him in the back seat, and I didn't want to do anything that wasn't appropriate, so I drove right home and put my car in the garage, and I said, "Mike, I had errands to do, but I didn't want to do it with Bill in the car." And he said, "What's wrong with you? Bill loved to go for a ride." But anyway,
And he stayed down
He
in the
stayed
old
in our bar for a long time. I talked to Bill all the time in the bar.
And before him, Rick Wertheimer.
Ricky was in the bar. I used to talk to him and have a drink with him. I've had a lot of people in the bar.
And those two, neither one of them were strangers to the bar.
And one day, this package came from New York, and it was like the size of a shoebox or something, and my cleaning woman said, that box has been there for months. And I said, oh, that's Jane Morgenthau. The girl was so freaked.
Well, Steve did the same thing. I was sitting in the dining porch here with Kathy, with Katie and Maggie, and Steve came up the front steps holding this gray cardboard box or whatever it was. And they said, what's in the box? And I didn't know what to say, so I said, well, ask your father. They asked him what was in the box, and he said, Grandpa. And they were very satisfied with that answer. I kind of,
Oh, is somebody with her? Hello.
hi.
Hello. 3 people are down there. You guys, oh, you're interviewing here?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is your mom around, Ann?
She's at a massage, I believe.
Okay.
You know, one day, when the kids were very, very small, they were playing behind the Simon house here, and they had a silent butler. And they'd heard that there were ashes and people's ashes, so they were playing. This is Ricky, this is Dolores. They were playing with from the mouths of babes.
That's strangely appropriate somehow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so logical.
Tell us about Aunt Peg's 75th birthday party
Up here.
up here.
Is that when you're? Is that when the
That's
boys were?
when
Bud?
your
Yeah.
father and your uncle, in their tuxedos and high hats, arrived in the convertible. I don't know whose it was. Was it Bud's?
Of course.
Red convertible, red.
Red convertible, top down, arrived in order to pick up Aunt Peg and take her next door to the Linden for a magnificent party. And it truly was. We've had some wonderful parties here,
Oh, boy.
both on and off the compound. When was the one where they roasted the pig?
That was the 4th of July.
That
I
was a
think.
lamb.
Yeah, that
And
was-
you're-
lamb,
You're
pardon
wearing
me.
the shirt.
That was the bicentennial.
Bicentennial.
Right.
I
We
sent
had-
in a wheel.
Right, and we had Shannon at the time, who was our golden retriever, Pursue's golden retriever, and Shannon just stuck right under that table as the
Oh,
drippings came down on her head and her tongue was out a foot or foot and a half. She was in heaven. So, but
I remember.
we have had corn roasts that have become only a memory because we're afraid to even have a fire up here these days. But if you've never eaten roasted corn by just pulling the husk down and dipping it in liquid butter, you've never tasted corn.
We had one back there when I was engaged. It was in the woods. I dug a pit. And Libby got drunk. And by the time she got finished, Bill was sure I'd never marry into that family. She was talking about her mother and how difficult it would be. And this was wrong and that was wrong. And
You didn't listen.
paid no attention.
Good for you.
Because no matter what went wrong, if I said, Bill, your mother is doing such and such, you would just go take care of her. I mean, she had strict rules. Lunch was at 12. You're not gonna, you're not gonna tell a kid in diapers in a hand chair who's screaming with hunger at noon, you have to wait an hour. So, I said, Bill, tell your mother Steve's eating at noon.
Well,
And she understood him, and whatever he said was okay.
Judy Cummins.
And
She
you know-
was a wonderful
You know,
woman.
I
We
don't
had-
know if any of you were ever part of this, but, you know, Buddy Simon was quite a navigator, which he learned with his flying.
Mhm.
And we used to take anything we could sit on and go up to the top of the hill, and we'd have a corn roast, and then Buddy would point out all the constellations. And I have really had a hard time telling the story that people would believe. I mean, that was part of his life up here and that we thoroughly enjoyed.
Mhm. I remember, by the way, one constellation, which really wasn't a constellation, it was one that went beep, beep, beep,
Oh.
beep, that John Mann pointed out to us. It was the very first Russian Sputnik.
We all went up to the top of the hill.
We most certainly did.
The
and
whole
watched it.
compound, and we stood up there and we waited till we could see this beep, beep. And that, I forgot, that was really thrilling.
So
You know-
it just was a light moving across the sky? Did it blink? Did it-
Yeah.
But we,
And you could hear-
we'd been told about what time it would come through this part of the country.
You know, we had a wonderful bell system here. First of all, when we were growing up, we had a telephone bell system because it was on a crank, and if we wanted to talk to somebody in the Mann house, you didn't need to dial, you just knew what ring to use. But the bells I'm talking about is the Simon house had a distinctive bell ring, and the Mann house had a different bell ring, and the Wheel house had a little tinkly bell ring. But it was the way you were called to meals, by the bell. And on Saturday nights,
It rang the other night.
right, Saturday nights, because we were talking about Jack Mann and Stone, there was a barbecue pit that was right centered in the backyard, built of Stone. You never tasted hamburgers like the way they could fry hamburgers on that barbecue pit, and then put them on those wonderful poppy seed hamburger buns that came from in town.
Cocklemeyer.
And yeah, unfortunately, even Slinger has changed. Maybe not for the better sometimes, but we all got together and we all ate together, sitting on those rickety wooden benches, and the tables, which looked beautiful last night, were not quite that well decorated just to have dinner on Friday night, but all the hamburgers and corn you could eat. Oh, we were in heaven.
Yeah, Cocklemeyer's was really something else, besides the buns.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the
The long Danish. Oh, without question. The hard rolls for breakfast and the long
the hard
Danish.
rolls and the long Danish.
Steve, do you remember my taking you in back into the bakery to watch the yellow bread come out of the oven?
I'm not sure if I exactly remember or not. Well, I
We
certainly
go
remember going
back.
in there. I remember the way Cocklemeyer's
The
smelled.
old wooden ovens, and they bring out the yellow bread. And that's where I would get confused, because they use cornstarch. And you'd say, how's so-and-so? Or you'd say, I want some white bread. The wheat bread is all. And when I was new, I would say, all what?
They said it's all.
It's all.
What does that
And
mean, Mom?
once I said, how was somebody, one of their parents? And Papa was,
Oh.
and it was, but, and they didn't answer their phone on Saturday.
The thing that I was always so amazed at, they had this wood-fired oven, and they built the fire early, and the things that needed the hottest oven would go in first, and those were the hard rolls. And people would go in and say, when can we have the long daintish? The long daintish had to wait until the fire was pretty well finished. So that was always the last thing that came out of the oven. And the kids couldn't understand, you know, this oven, and neither could the state.
That's right.
And the state put them out of
Yeah,
business.
that
Well,
was a
the
shame.
Cockelmeyers decided they weren't about to put in new ovens just to satisfy the state,
That's
so
right.
they did go out of business.
They went out.
Anybody remember the beautiful lilacs that grew around the barbecue in the middle of the yard? Until one day, Jim Mann decided that we really didn't need those. They were a distraction, and he went without asking anybody, and he just cut them down. Gone. The lilacs were all.
Now, do you know why the lilacs were planted there in the first place?
No, did somebody die?
No, they were planted there because Will Simon would sit here at the dining table, and when he looked across the yard, he was looking at the man's outhouse on the other side of the yard. So he had lilacs planted to grow up so he wouldn't see the outhouse, and then 2 years later, the man's needed that for another space, so they moved the outhouse over.
Well, I will tell you about having moved that outhouse, because when they were digging the hole for the new outhouse, young Marion Wheel went over and watched them digging, and because my mother was a very curious woman, not curious and strange, but always interested, she looked down, she says, how long will it take to fill that up? And the man looked up to her and said, not in your lifetime, lady.
Oh, boy.
Well, we had an outhouse back here.
Certainly did.
That-
Knotty Pine.
Because there were times when the electricity went off. It's now our tool shed.
That's right. But it was a beautiful two-holer. And
No, you want me to take her away there?
no, she's just
She doesn't
Hey,
like
Beck.
people in hats
What
sometimes.
tool shed are you talking about? The ours?
No, the Simon one.
Where's the
Behind-
tool shed?
It's behind the annex.
I never knew it was there.
well. You too young.
You've been in the family long enough.
Now you can go back and look at it. Be careful.
But you'll probably find some cats living in there right now. I think those wild cats
Yeah,
that you've
are
seen
living in
are
there.
living in there.
And probably some wasp nests and stuff too.
You know, if you look at the front lawn, and it's really quite an expanse. John used to push a lawnmower up and down the front lawn to cut the grass.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, when I first came into the family, the lawn only went, I forget how many feet, and then it was like a hayfield because of the war.
Yeah, because who was here to cut it?
All that lawn.
Oh.
What year did you get married?
48. So the spring of 48 was the first time I came up here. And Bill wouldn't let his mother see me, know me, anything about me. And she went to the lake in the morning, and that evening she called him up, and if you remember, Joe, this type of thing, she said, I forgot the oleo. So when the oleo, because the oleo in Wisconsin was white.
Was white, absolutely, with that little brown pocket that
So
you could squeeze.
They brought it up from Illinois.
Wait, how
'cause
how
it
is
was
that
yellow.
different from oleo in general? What?
It was white. You had to put the stuff in to make it yellow.
To look like butter.
It was,
Okay.
you know,
There's a
this
law
was the
in
dairy
Wisconsin that did
state,
not
they
sell
couldn't
margarine
have.
with color in it to make it, so if it was on the table, you knew that you weren't getting real butter,
It was raw oleo. Got it.
Ugh.
Yeah.
uncolored.
Color you.
And then he said to her, she said to him, what else is new? And he said, I'm getting married. She said, well, when was this decided? He said, last night. She said, and you let me come up to the lake without telling me? So then, the next day, we came up to the lake, and that's when she met me. But he would never let her near me. And once I said, I was at Northmore at a party, and it was an engagement thing, and I said, some nice lady said hello to me. And I was hanging up my coat. Oh, there she is now. He said, that's my mother. But he wouldn't let me near her.
You know, if we think back before then to the thing called the Second World War, and everybody, including JoJo, were in service, all in uniform. Everyone arranged somehow to keep touch and see each other somewhere, somehow, through that war. It was amazing. It was fascinating. Of course, those of us who also served who were too young and stayed home. But
So do you know where
it's a
some
close-
people met?
well, I think we should defer to the lieutenant or captain. Which were you?
You outranked
Or
John.
colonel?
You outranked John.
You
didn't
outranked John.
By a couple months.
Yes.
But as I
And you never let him forget it.
He became a captain,
Right.
yeah. I just happened to be there a little earlier.
Didn't
Yeah.
First Lieutenant Joanne Goldberger marry Second Lieutenant John Mann? That's the way I always heard it.
Whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
I have a
I
question
think
that
it's
I've
kind of
never,
a shame that the kids today, you know, this is history to them. And they don't realize Joe was overseas, Bill was in Europe, Louis Wertheimer was in Europe. Oh, Louis Wertheimer was in Europe, and Jim Mann was flying for the Marines in the Pacific.
He was flying over Okinawa.
So that there were
And Bunny
people
Wheel.
that are related to them that were in a real shooting war.
But he ended up with valley fever
Mm-hmm.
and ended up in Fitzsimmons.
What was Fitzsimmons?
Yep.
What was Fitzsimmons?
Military hospital.
At
Where?
that-
Prison.
in Denver, I think,
Okay.
yeah. But he was teaching pilots in Arizona, and the dust and so forth and so on got to his lungs, and he developed valley fever. My brother had valley fever for a whole year. It's no fun.
No.
I have a question, and I
Just
think, Mike,
like
you're the
the
only
big
one who might be able to answer it. What was Cedar Lake like? What was life here like during the war? Because first of all, it couldn't have been easy to get here, or it couldn't have been as frequent. I mean, gas was rationed. Did people still come here in the summertime? And how much? And
Yeah.
We did, and at that time, we would come up for a month, and as a matter of fact, one of the reasons it was easier for us to get here is Dad's in his job got him a much higher ration card, or whatever you called it, that went on the windshield. ABC, and I think his was either a B or an A. So he got much more gas. It was a long ride then from St. Louis here. It was 11 or 12 hours. And Mother brought help up. One of the women she brought up as help, who was off in the evenings, kind of wandered up the hill to a farm called Kimmerling's. She met young George Kimmerling, and she married him. And of course, next door, the Linden was originally Kimmerling's. And we have kind of lost touch of the Kimmerling family, but we were in touch with them for a long time.
Lots of interesting things, by the way, have happened during summers up here. Movement between houses from time to time, and I think enough said there.
Wait, you can't start that and not go on.
Oh, yes, I can.
Movement of family members from one house to the next through rearrangement.
Let's just say some people have come up to visit here who have been closer to others here that they would barely have known in other parts of the world.
You know, talking about during the war, on our honeymoon, we came out here and cleaned garbage cans.
Oh, goodness.
So, you know, we were married in September and things were closing up, so it was our little job to come out and help close up the place.
Where was Maggie Gale?
Who knows? And Rosie,
They were an important part of the lake.
they surely were. But we have pictures of us cleaning the garbage thing.
You still do it, Joey. Josie.
Yeah, I guess I still do it. Yeah.
Oh, one night for supper, when Will and Celeste were up for a weekend, and we had salad, and Celeste said, "This is wonderful lettuce. Where did you get it? It's just delicious." And I said, "Well, Maggie Gale gave it to me."
Mm-hmm.
And Celeste sat up and said, "Mrs. Gale never gave me anything." Meanwhile, what were you calling her, Magoo or something? Maggie, you had a nickname for her. And we knew Maggie very well, but to anybody else, she was Mrs. Gale.
She was about 6 feet tall. She was scary looking.
And then
Big woman.
Big woman.
she had a daughter, Rosie, who married, what was his name?
Henry Weils.
Henry.
Henry. And they were painters. Except that Henry had height fright. So whenever they had to do the shutters or do anything up high out here, Rosie did the high parts and Henry would hold the ladder. And we'd say we wanted the same blue shutters, Henry. And these aren't the color I remember from when I was first married. It was whatever he bought.
You know, this house, Valley Pines, was built with the kitchen on the inside. The first two houses were not. Both the White House and the Four Doors had separate kitchens. Of course, Four Doors had both separate dining room and kitchen. They were built that way because you cooked on wood stoves. And wood stoves were noted for causing fires. And if you were going to have a fire in the kitchen, you wanted it limited to the kitchen and not to burn down the rest of the house.
It was also the heat up.
Absolutely, I guess. I always remember at the White House that wonderful breezeway between the kitchen and the dining room. And it's, of course, the dining room, which is basically the same as it always was, with that nice, tiny little table to seat 44 people. But never, ever were Cedar Lake pancakes cooked better than they were cooked on the wood stove in that kitchen when Eleanor Mann ran that house. And if you were very, very lucky, Elle would invite you to come over for breakfast one morning for Cedar Lake pancakes. It was a gastronomical heaven. I can't even get Nancy to even think about those things now.
You know, and we had a big ice box.
True ice box, not refrigerator.
Yeah. And we came over and we watched them cut ice out of the lake down near Sandy Beach. And they'd store it in a big ice house. It was not the cleanest ice, but we used to suck it anyway.
That's exactly right. So,
And you know, a funny thing happened lately. The kids, and I'm speaking of Carolyn and
Megan.
Megan, said, we never realized what the song was about. I can't remember, all of a sudden I've forgotten the song of all the things that were going on back in the shack.
Oh, yes.
The shack out back.
Was that
Shack out
yours?
there.
No,
No,
David.
No, that was
Oh,
David.
David's.
David and Marjorie.
And it was, the kids said, you know, we just caught on to that song.
Really?
What was going on in the shack?
And Sally and Peggy would get so upset. Why can't we go back there and be with them?
You know, we were driving up, we were talking about the long trip up here. We were driving. Dad had a big Buick, and if you remember in those days, Buick had 2 spare tires mounted into the front fenders. And we're driving up, and Highway 66 then was a rural road, and there were a whole flock of chickens that went flying up, and we heard a thump. Could never find anything, so we got back in the car and off we went. 4 days later, they found the chicken by smell wedged in the tire well of the car. Oh, it was no fun getting rid of that thing. So,
Do you remember when that K was a dirt road? You must.
I certainly do. I remember it as a dirt road, and I remember when Bill had his motor scooter. And if you drove it down Highway K, it was truly death-defying. Because you were riding on a rock road or a dirt rock
Eleanor
road.
Man had a little tiff because every spring they would oil the road, keep the dust out in the summer, and nobody would come and do it. And she called Polk County. Oh no, we don't do that. West Bend County does it. West Bend County said, we don't do that. Polk County does it. And finally, Eleanor Mann said to her, I don't care who does it, but we aren't paying our taxes until that road is oiled. And it was. I don't know who did it.
Well, there were 2 things that happened when the road was widened. We lost a whole row of magnificent trees,
Right.
including a walnut. And
Going up K?
on K,
Yeah.
yeah, because they had to widen the road. And they were magnificent trees. The other thing that was good was that our house got dusty all the time. You could hardly leave a window open because the cars going up the road would just pick up this dust. And particularly when we came in for spring cleaning, it was horrible, even though the windows had been closed and so forth. It was a real, so there are advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes when you open a house for the first time in the summer, you find very interesting things have spent the winter in the house.
That's still the
Including a
case.
dead cat once.
Oh yeah, we had that here.
I have a question about the White House when it was run by Antini and by Eleanor and Jack. Who are the guests other than the Wallersteins? Who are the guests and where
The
did they come
Victors?
from?
There
Oh,
were,
Victor and Belly Von, you're so stupid. What was her name?
yeah, there were friends and people from St. Louis, as well as from Chicago. But they all were friends and happened to, you know, they came up here when Rosenheimer's burned down. And that was the whole reason for building the White House. Everybody said if we want to come back, and if you will build a guest house, we will be your guests, because Antini was a widow with no money, and they felt that that could be her income. So it's a whole complicated thing with Will and everybody else being a part of it. But the Hirsches were one couple that came up, and he was as tight as a wheel, I guess, so they said.
Nice talk.
And, yeah, oh, pardon me, I didn't mean those wheels.
Wheel with an H.
And coming up here, he'd find the roads that had the highest hills, so he could coast with his motor off.
Oh, gosh.
And what about Eugene Schwartz?
Oh, boy.
And back then, in the, I don't know, what would you call it, where the steps come down and the piano sat right there,
Oh, yeah.
and Eugene Schwartz, who could tell stories and sing and play the piano, and it was such fun in the evenings. And as kids, we were sung off to bed. And I miss the piano.
But our kids hated the fact that they used to say, "Good night, ladies."
Good night, whoever you
And
were.
whoever you are, and they had to go up the stairs, and doggone it, Jimmy axed that piano and burned it.
You know,
Thought it was Jack.
Huh?
Thought it
No,
was Jack.
no, I think it
Jim.
was probably Jim.
It was
Jim was
It
a
was
disruptor.
he was.
He decided certain things,
He didn't have the
and he did them without a vote.
No,
But,
it was Jim.
you know,
John
if
was
you
so
think about
furious.
getting sung up the stairs, they stole that from us and put it in Sound of Music.
If somebody had told Jim that if you find the right buyer, it's worth a heck of a lot of money, he would never have done that.
I think that
It
was
was a
It would have just disappeared one day when
It
he
was a
sold it.
cherry square
Oh.
piano.
Wanted to spin it,
Mm.
sort of.
Huh?
Spin it.
I mean, it was a beautiful piece of,
Mike, are you the
It was
oldest?
really a wonderful
wheel?
antique
Not
that
outlaw,
never
but
should have been destroyed.
Wheels.
Mhm.
I often
Left.
wonder where it came from.
Yeah, I suspect that I am the oldest.
These, we're all outlaws. Mike must be the oldest wheel left, huh? Is that right?
And
Yeah.
if I'd start squeaking, maybe I can get some oil. It's a very funny feeling. I never would have
It just,
expected to be here at this age. I love it here.
I sat at the lake the other day and I thought, my God, I've been coming here since I was 16. So I've been coming here for 60 years and I used to be like the kid. And now we're sitting here as the old folks. I mean, it just in a flash.
I remember the first time that you came here. You were coming back from camp,
I did.
and you stopped off here for a visit. Our chaperone was Aunt Peg, and she took care of things here. Delightfully, this house was sitting empty. What a wonderful way for privacy.
We should just sneak up here and neck. Does anybody even know what necking is anymore?
Yes, it comes
Yeah, we
off of a
do.
chicken.
Comes off the chicken. Oh
We
my.
now have
Mike, I
another
never
dog.
realized until now that you are a true patriarch. And I just want to say that I will continue to treat you with all of the respect and courtesy that I
Yeah.
always have.
Right, thank you. I would like to see it kept that way, too.
Do you remember the summer that the Wheel Cottage was rented to the Goldbergers?
I'd rather not,
And there
thank
were
you.
We don't wanna go there.
two little screened-in beds under the trees down there. Every afternoon, these little tiny twins would take their naps outside.
Yeah.
Did John build those?
One of them,
The screened-in
yeah.
baby cribs.
But we had one to copy, fortunately. Yeah, down in the middle of the grass.
And I don't know Chip would remember, but he took the longest naps of anybody on the compound. And Joe would be sitting in the house with him. Everybody else would be down at the lake with me. We were the only ones that were here all summer.
Don, you're very quiet today, but I just have to say that nobody missed Nan any more than I did yesterday.
Yeah, there was one person.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Well, the lake was always, for me, was when the Steels arrived, because of there was often time when nobody else was in the house, and
Nan and Don were here.
Nan and Don were here, and it made the summer.
We tried to do that, come up when it was empty.
We had some heck of a good time with you guys.
Nobody tries to do that now. No.
Really? You know what? I was invited to your wedding. I was at Nan and Don's wedding.
Did you come?
Yes, I came.
Certainly did.
I
Did you
came
da-
as
did
Mike
you-
Weils' date.
Did you dance with the groom?
I don't know. I danced with a man who danced with a girl who danced with the Prince of Wales. I don't know.
Da da da.
Da da da.
You were married the day after Nan and I graduated from
High school.
Or grammar school. I didn't-
No, it was high
I
school.
mean, it was so long ago, Don.
It
was high school.
You transferred from kindergarten to first grade.
Whatever it was,
Yeah.
it was,
Yes.
Oh my.
and
I
it
thought-
was at your prenuptial dinner, Don, where Aunt Peg
Oh, I will never.
was up on the table because someone had said, we heard there's a group.
Lou Washour said that.
I guess.
Oh, about
we-
the hell
we
with the
heard
wheel.
No, he said we heard there was a group of people who said the wheels should go to hell. And Peg got up on the table. She says, "That's absolutely wrong.
You
It's
said
here's
that
to
wrong.
it's here's to the wheels. To hell with them."
Aunt Peg didn't get up from the table. Aunt Peg got on top of the table.
That's what I said.
Oh, I thought.
Peg
you
got up
didn't.
on top of the table.
And Don Steele's family, I'm sure, thought, oh my God, we better call off.
Yeah, my mother wondered what the hell was going on.
Well,
Listen,
I will tell you.
I have great memories of Peg driving
Oh yes,
and getting stuck on a railroad track in Singer.
and saying goodbye to that blue Plymouth.
Oh boy, oh boy.
What
She
happened?
didn't learn to drive.
Peg, no, Peg was a wonderful driver, and she only took half of the road. Unfortunately, she took it right out of the middle. Well, when you think about it, Peg was 50 years old when she learned to drive.
Yeah.
She was stopped by a policeman one time and she said, "Officer, I have to go to the bathroom."
She was
So
double
bad.
parking. She said when you
It made the officer so nervous.
He said, "Go on."
Go to the bathroom.
And she was.
What happened to the Blue Plymouth on the train tracks?
The train took it
Where was this?
in Slinger.
Down
going-
on,
it's going
what's
slowly.
the Waukesha?
Hmm?
What's the road that we take to Waukesha?
I th-
That crossing.
175?
The one that
70
went uphill a little bit?
Yeah, what's it, 171?
175.
175. Of course, you see, that was before that other, before the other road came in. 175 was the road you got here on.
It was called
she
41
was
back
with
then.
Jean Wheel.
Jean with a J.
Gee,
Yeah,
Yeah.
not Mike's dad.
No, no, no.
No, Alvin's wife.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get this car started, and they just got out of it and watched the
Well,
train.
they didn't die on
No,
the...
clearly, but they just watched as the car just got wiped away.
I hear they were arguing. I hear they were talking about
How
what to
strange
do.
that would have been.
I hear they were talking about, well, you should do this, you should do that to get the car off the train. I wasn't there. This was before I was born.
Nor was I.
Okay.
But
How old are you today, Steve?
Happy birthday,
today,
Steve.
Today I am 62, and Antini is 158.
Aunt Teeny's 158?
and she
Today,
doesn't
yes.
look a day over 100.
Yup to
And
you, young
Ringo
man.
Starr is 72.
Ah,
You know, we talk about JoJo and family startling other people. Frequently, when there are celebrations going on in restaurants, we'll get up and we'll sing, and everybody else in the restaurant is kind of looking around like, huh? But we're very shy. We're a very shy family. It sometimes is difficult but fun to explain or try to explain this family to people who have no concept of what a truly loving family can be. And for them to think that, well, there can be a party up here or a celebration as there was last year for Sarah and Gina's wedding, where it's, you know, you get 75, 80 people who've come in from all over the country just to celebrate, just to enjoy not only the particular celebration, but just the joy of being together.
And you know, I've sort of explained it to friends as it being a magnet for a family. And there aren't many families that have this kind of a magnet.
No, it is.
It would draw people everywhere together.
I had a friend that described it as old-fashioned summer. And that's really kind of fits this place too, I think.
Yeah.
We've had friends that have come up here with children, and as they leave, the children are crying. They don't want to go home.
Yeah.
They have so much fun up here.
I had somebody call me once because Peggy was bringing a friend up, and he wanted to know about the lake and how we took care of the swimmers. I said, the first thing, our generation, our children, if you say you want to go for a boat ride, they don't run for the boat, they run your boathouse to get a life jacket. Your daughter will not be in the boat without a life jacket. She will not be in the water alone because we insist on the buddy system. And every time I read about some dumb guy with 16 people in a 10-foot boat that turns over, and realize how water safety was such a big part of our lives down there.
Continues to be, fortunately.
Yeah.
You know, Nan and I came up a lot of years ago with another couple from St. Louis.
Oh,
And we arrived here and we drove down to unload the cars, and as we got out, as is wont to happen, people from other houses came out to greet us, and Nancy and I are talking, and the couple we were with turned to Nancy and they said, you know, you have conversations with the people who've come out of these houses, not sounding like you've been gone a year, but sounding like you've been gone one day. It's that kind of continuity and continuum.
You know, the building of the lakefront is a long story.
It's a long lakefront.
When our kids were growing up, we wanted sand for the kids to play in, and at that time we ordered sand to be put on the lake when the ice was there, and the trucks could dump the ice on them, dump the sand on the ice, and it would go through. And the kids had this wonderful
Sandbox.
yeah, I mean, it was sort of like the beach somewhere, and it was wonderful for the little kids. Then all of a sudden the DNR said no more dumping of sand on the ice, and that's when they started to build up the lakefront with these big concrete whatevers that John had worked out. And so that changed a lot over the years with the fences and everything else.
Well, we always had a sand in the water, have the trucks, dump trucks come, and I can remember Zach Steele. I said, I am going to have a beach for my grandchildren coming for the first time. Jimmy Mann said I couldn't do it, it was against the law. I said, I am going to have a beach. And they came, and here's this mound of sand on the grass, and Zach Steele, I called it Zach's Mountain, spent the whole afternoon sliding down the sand, therefore bringing the sand into the water. But there was always a little sand beach, and Jimmy Mann left the waterfront. He said, I don't want him to be able to say, Jim, you knew better, why didn't you stop her? Well, nobody did, fortunately. That was the last, and then the kids got sick and didn't come. But we all enjoyed the sand beach. That was the
Yeah,
last
but for a long time, it wasn't against the law.
No.
They just did it.
Maybe we
Let's say
should,
goodbye.
This was wonderful. We'll do it again soon. There's people who couldn't be here. David was here this weekend. Unfortunately, he went golfing. He would have been a fine addition. So we'll have to do this. I like how you guys really got rolling about 45 minutes into it.
If you do it again in another 20 years,
let's
Wave
not
to
talk.
us.
Yeah,
Pardon?
that's.
All right, thank you all.
I keep thinking of Aunt Sadie couldn't celebrate her 80th birthday because her mother was sick. That could be me.
That's exactly
Well,
what
you
I
remember
thought.
Charlie was leaving, he was 70 something, and he was leaving work a little early in New York. He said, oh, I'll miss my plane. It's my mother-in-law's birthday. Now, who at age 70 is going to his mother-in-law's birthday party? You know?
How about Mike at 77 going to his
I don't
mother-in-law's?
think that's a nice thing to say.
But really, you know, he told the story about
Yeah.
everybody looking at him thinking,
Right.
you can't have a mother-in-law.
Look,
What are we looking at?
somebody's leading the way and the little guy is carrying the garbage.
Listen to me, it doesn't hurt the little guys to care.
Is that Dylan?
No, Dylan's gone.
Oh, they left. Who is that?
Must be Andrew.
Andrew Steele.
It's coming from here, it's not coming from.
Oh, is
From
that,
your house, I don't know.
oh, it might be Jeremy.
Might be Jeremy.
All right.
Douglas?